Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast, DRAGGIN. I'm your host, Chris Gore. Film Threat is a podcast that comes out every week. We talk about films. We also interview filmmakers who, we've interviewed everyone from Morgan Neville, who did Won't You Be My Neighbor, to Bart Layton, the director of American Animals. Very proud of our work on the podcast, and I'm very proud to be able to present to you some people who actually I never get to do the podcast with. An amazing group of people here on the East Coast. So I will introduce them. Bobby LePire from the Film Threat website.
Hi, guys.
Shane Mackey, local comedian here in Atlanta.
Hello.
Bradley Gibson, a writer for the Film Threat website.
Hello.
Patty Hawkins, also a comedian, actor, performer, improviser. Should I keep going? Host.
I'm a geek gadfly.
A geek gadfly. Oh, I love that. And Brian Richardson, many of you know from here in Atlanta, DragonCon, an amazing writer, filmmaker. If you watch DragonConTV, as I always do when I come to DragonCon, one of the benefits of staying in one of the surrounding hotels, he is responsible for much of the content, and you might have seen him this morning during the DragonCon parade. If you watch the television coverage on the CW, he's one of the commentators and someone I follow on social media and love to see every year. Brian Richardson, everyone. He's not.
You thought you could come to a room without a television and get away from me. That was foolish.
So we have a lot to talk about. There's so much. I know that we promised to talk about shared universes in the description, but in the Film Threat podcast, we talk about a lot of different things. And we will definitely talk about shared universes. I mean, we're very familiar with the Marvel universe, right? But I want to continue our conversation because I feel like we left on a cliffhanger, much like any good Star Wars movie. A good Star Wars movie ends on a cliffhanger. We had yesterday. How many were at the last Jedi debate? The second last Jedi debate. Well, this is the epilogue.
I'll try to keep my jacket on.
This you're about to hear is the epilogue. This is the scene after the credits of the movie version of the last Jedi debate, because I feel Patty may have been a bit overwhelmed in the sense that it was everyone against Patty, and I feel like he didn't get to articulate his statements as well as he would have liked, or because we've done plenty of panels together. So I'd just like to finish that debate. How many of you saw The Last Jedi? How many loved it? How many disliked it? Well. So it's a smaller percentage, but it certainly has caused a lot of debate online. Patty, your thoughts as you did not get to express them during the panel.
Well, to me, the big thing about The Last Jedi is it's never about the film itself. I think it's how it's become one of the linchpins of the divisiveness among geek culture. You know, we're in a transitional phase right now, and right now, things are moving either too fast for some or not fast enough for others, and nobody seems to be happy right now. And everybody seems to be, everybody has a stop hating what I like and stop liking what I hate. And my whole thing is that if you don't like it, cool. Just don't be a dick online. That's all. That's all. Don't go after the actors, you know? It's like, I think Rian Johnson's fair game because he's active on social media and he engages, good, bad, or ill, whatever it's to, but don't go after the actors. I'm an actor, okay? You get offered a gig, you take a gig. There's nobody in this room that if you said, here's the worst Star Wars script ever, but we're gonna pay you $100,000 to be in a Star Wars movie, who's gonna say no?
We have three movies We have three movies that'll prove that actually happened.
So that's really all I wanted to say was really it's not about whether you want to like the movie or dislike the movie or whatever. It's just that you know right now Star Trek's kind of in a flux. Right now Doctor Who is going to be a bit of a flux, and I want to get out of this new frontier wilderness years socially, and everybody feels we have parody again. So we can just telling good, fun, kick-ass, thought-provoking, Roddenberry, Terry Nathan's and classic stories. That's all. You know, I just want to watch ray guns and capes and swords and eat my popcorn and have a good time and have a good conversation with my friends afterwards about, hey, do you think maybe this is about this, about this? That's all. That's all. As opposed to screaming on 4chan or one of the other sites that will not name the names.
Well, I think the problem with the Star Wars is spread it out a little. Don't just shove it out so fast that you haven't had time to really digest it, and that way put more thought into the next one. That's all I want to see.
Well, that is another thing too, and this is indicative of a lot of the franchises. Why does Marvel movies work so well? The Marvel Studio ones, I'll put the caveat on that, suppose the Fox ones. Kevin Feige, love him or like him, he is the node. He is the one force that says the buck stops here, and this is what it works. You may have loved or hated what Lucas did, but the buck stopped with him. With the Muppets, it was all like Henson. The buck stopped with him. And these franchises, I feel you need somebody in charge. Somebody take the credit, somebody take the fall, but somebody that says, I'm here and I have an idea and we're going to move forward with this. And gosh, I wish somebody at Time Warner could do this with DC.
All right, well, that's a great segue into talking about shared universes. We're all familiar with, of course, the Marvel movies and the shared universe that has evolved into, I think, one of the best cliffhangers in movie history, alongside, I would say, The Empire Strikes Back, which is the ending of Infinity War. Exactly. Well, the ending of Infinity War, I mean, it was really a shocker. It's the first Marvel movie where the good guys lost, right? They all lost, and in a shocking way. And I mean, in particular, the Peter Parker melting away into ash. It was heart-wrenching. Yes, exactly. It was sad. I mean, I remember I walked out of a screening of it and saw young kids crying. I mean, it really was. I mean, it was shocking. So, but the success of this shared universe brings up a point. I think Marvel gets a lot of credit for a shared universe, but there are other shared universes. And I'd like each of you to talk about a shared universe that you're aware of from movie history. And I'll kick it off. I'm going to go old school. Universal Monsters. Universal Monsters was not only a shared universe with the Wolfman, Frankenstein, I mean, it was Dracula, all of those. And what's interesting is how it even segued into Abbott and Costello. Abbott and Costello became a part of the shared universe of Universal Monsters. I mean, that's an example of a shared universe. So the idea of a serialized storytelling at the movies isn't new. I just think that Marvel did it incredibly well. Bobby, and working our way down, would you guys like to talk about another shared universe that our audience may not be aware of?
I would like to spotlight the shared universe of the Full Moon movies, specifically involving Dollman, Demonic Toys, Bad Channels, and eventually the hideous films come into that with Demonic Toys 2. They do a very similar setup for the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that they don't really set anything up in the movies. You have to wait for the end credits and the stingers to happen throughout all of them. And they ignore any continuity that just doesn't work for them, like how most of Iron Man 2 is ignored. I can't remember if Demonic Toys or Dollman came out first off the top of my head, but at the end of the Bad Channels, which was released before either one of them, it's about these aliens taking over a rock station. One of the female lead gets zapped up into the alien ship, and she's just left there, and we have no idea what's going to happen. Dollman's about this little alien guy who crash lands on our planet, and he's only like 6 inches tall on our planet, but he's one of the world's greatest cops, the galaxy's greatest cops. And then Demonic Toys is what it sounds like. In a warehouse, a demon possesses a toy in order to lure a pregnant woman into letting the demon invade the soul of her unborn child. And then in Dollman vs. Demonic Toys, that alien is being followed by Brick Bardo is the Dollman, and he crash lands the ship into that same warehouse, and the ship also contains the woman from Bad Channels. Then years later, there's like 2 decades, we get Demonic Toys 2, which is about those same Demonic Toys, and it ties into another mid-90s film called Hideous.
Okay, can I just say you know more about full moon movies than any human should be allowed? Oh my God, Bobby, that's amazing.
You should write for Film Thread.
Well, Bobby actually, I don't know if you guys are Sharknado fans. I'm a fan of Sharknado. I love the Sharknado films. He wrote one of the most expansive, incredible essays about the Sharknado movies, which is on Film Thread. Just look up Sharknado. Oh my God, such a great essay. I'm so glad that you and I both love those films. I think it's okay to love. I mean, look, you can love your Oscar-winning movies and all that, but also I think it's good. You have to have a balanced diet, right? Marvel movies, Star Wars, little Charlie Band, and Full Moon, and Sharknado mixed in. Shane, what's your favorite shared universe?
I think it's one that never took off like it should have, but Tarantino had an idea for like a shared universe.
Right.
Because Michael Madsen and from Reservoir Dogs and Travolta were supposed to be brothers.
Right.
And they were supposed to be a Vega Brothers movie that kind of never happened. And he had these concepts of like a real universe and a fantasy universe, and only Harvey Keitel's Wolf character could go back and forth between the two.
Oh, that's cool.
But once everything kind of crapped out after Pulp Fiction, I guess he just kind of dropped it because...
Well, if he makes a Star Trek movie, the Star Trek film could actually be part of the shared universe. Because Star Trek is supposed to be our fictionalized future, right?
You want to see Harvey Keitel pantsless in Star Trek?
Yes, that would be great.
Bad lieutenant just swaying naked in the breeze. I don't want to see that.
I want to see the wolf in space.
9 light years and 59 parsecs later.
But I'd love to see the wolf in space kind of roll up and solve problems. That would be awesome.
So
Brad.
that would be Wolf 359, right?
Right.
Thank you.
It'd be the clone of Wolf in the future.
So I'm excited about the new Glass film coming from M. Night.
Oh, yes.
So, if you remember Unbreakable, I remember reading a story back then that Knight had actually taken the script that he had for Unbreakable to some friend of his who was in the industry, and the person's feedback was, Act 1 of this script is a movie, the rest of it you should throw away. And he took that advice, and that was Unbreakable. But apparently there was more to that story. And then you find out at the end of Split that it's part of a shared experience, and now we're getting Glass. And if you've seen the trailer for Glass, it looks very exciting, and I'm really jazzed about that film coming up.
Cool.
I was not a fan of Unbreakable, but for some reason I was really psyched for Glass. Maybe it's because it's been so long, and again the little film at the end. So yeah, definitely with that one too. You did that one. You did that one. I'll tell you what. I'll tweak it in a little bit opposite direction. Whenever they've tried to create a shared universe and done it so incredibly inelegantly, anybody remember Halle Berry's Agent Jinx from James Bond?
Oh, God.
They were going to spin her off.
That's right.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, they were going to spin her off, and
My soul hurts.
Fantastic Four 2, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Hey, they were almost going to say Silver Surfer movie, come on out. Whenever they walk into it with an expectation and they try to push the characters too much, the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie stops being a Daredevil movie the second they introduce Elektra, and it just becomes his character arc stops completely. And when there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I think the Marvel films do it when we'll put the little side character in there, maybe give them a side quest and have them do one little thing, but they're not going to take over the narrative. And in those cases, it always seemed like it stopped, and then the main character suddenly becomes the guest star of that property.
Cool.
Yeah, the other example doing that badly, I think, is the Tom Cruise Mummy, which attempted to build a shared universe. Unfortunately, the thing that you have to do is watch The Mummy to understand there's going to be a shared universe, and nobody did that. So that's not going to work. I'm going to go super old school because this is becoming relevant again. Toho's Godzilla. They pulled that off for decades. Man in a rubber suit, smashing a city. The city's probably made of yesterday's Tokyo Press. But it went through for decades and is now back into the King Kong because they're going to tie that into what they're now doing after Kong Skull Island, which I love that movie. I love that they just went in and said, okay, this is a monster movie. We all know there's Kong, right? We're not going to do the classic, like the classic reveal on King Kong. Still a great movie. The remake of it where it's like, we all know there's going to be a giant thing, right? And then they don't show it for a while. They're just going to show up and go, nope, Samuel Jackson versus that giant thing. And then they do find a way to tie that into the possibility of bringing everything back in. So I think that And it's the same thing you were talking about before with movies that throw out their canon when it doesn't work. That Godzilla franchise throws that out. It's like, we don't always need twins that can talk to giant moths. Maybe we'll just leave that off to the side for a while.
The Godzilla Kaiju series was the exception that proves the rule about having your own sub-canon and then it just basically cherry-picking it when you needed to for that particular film. Any other series, that would make my autism explode. But but the whole thing is that, yeah, it could. Godzilla's Revenge was oh, hey, I'm Godzilla Jr., and I'm going to bring this little kid to the island, and we're going to learn about being brave and being a hero. And meanwhile, 5 years ago, Godzilla was laying waste to Tokyo. But hey, it works both ways.
Yeah, that's a great one to bring up. The old school Godzilla movies. I mean, just and the fact that they're going to use the themes, musical themes for those characters, Rodan, Ghidorah, King Ghidorah, Mothra, in the new Godzilla film, King of the Monsters, I'm super excited about. That was the trailer that I saw at San Diego Comic-Con that I think was the thing that got me most excited. The best thing that come out of there. That and Aqua Bro. I think Aqua Bro was the Aquaman trailer. He looked like Aqua Bro. He looks like Aqua Bro. I'm surprised no one mentioned the View Askewniverse.
Bro.
That Kevin Smith.
That's
First of all, it's awesome that he was able, to connect all of that. And obviously, Kevin Smith being a huge comic book fan.
He's got a C-3PO and R2-D2 basically that carry you all the way through those movies.
That's true.
That's kind of Jay and Silent Bob. They are the C-3PO and R2-D2 of that franchise.
Yeah.
Just with more weed.
Yeah.
And then he has
Kids in the
his
audience
new
don't watch
trilogy,
those for a couple years.
which
Okay.
is all connected by the Johnny Depp character.
Right. Tusk and
Tusk, Yoga Hosers, and Moose Jaw. Is that what
Is
that
that
one's
the
called?
new one?
Yeah.
And we had
That's cool.
And then there's the Tromaverse.
Right, there's the Tromaverse, right? Yeah, Toxie, Class of Nukem High, all that stuff. That's great. But I love, you mentioned The Mummy with Tom Cruise. It's my favorite. I'm a fan of cosplay that's you can make from household items. So if any of you saw the Tom Cruise Mummy movie, did you? Show of no hands. One guy half puts his hand. Two guys, three. Okay, three people. 3 people in this whole room saw it. Just go into the bathroom, grab some toilet paper, wrap it around your hand. You're Tom Cruise from The Mummy. Because that's how the movie ends, with basically his hand. It's oh, yes, I guess he's the mummy now, because he has bandage wrap on his hand.
So he's like a were-mummy? I mean, how does that
Lame.
work?
They totally, they scrapped that. Where do we stand on the DC universe? Obviously, that's a connected universe planned from the beginning. They were trying to...
You actually said
Planned?
Yeah.
You mean planned like a gated community in the suburbs of Atlanta planned that never gets its swimming pool and tennis court, but you still pay the dues for it to the HOA? Is that the kind of planning we're talking about?
We have a nice shuffleboard.
Yeah, that's kind of planning. That really, frankly, at this point, I would rather see what Zack Snyder's vision was for Justice League Part 1 and 2, because I want to see a steampunk Batman. I want to know what those sort of future visions were about. I'm not saying I'll enjoy it. I'll be on a podcast complaining about it.
Honestly,
the minute after I see it.
They invested so much at that point. They should have let it run the race.
Right.
Right. I think they should have. You'd already done it at this point. And now, of course, it seems like they're going to do an universe where everything's going to be a la carte, and they're talking about the 70s crime Joker origin movie. With Joaquin Phoenix, and then another Joker movie, and maybe that's the better choice. But you're absolutely right, though. Win, lose, or draw, we should at least let it finish.
I'll be happy if there's at least one movie they make that I like that isn't Wonder Woman.
Well, yeah, Wonder Woman 84 looks pretty good. I saw some footage of it, and I think it looks pretty good. There's not a trailer out yet. They still have to explain how Steve Trevor's in the movie. What's he doing? What's going on? A clone, a son, a robot? Who knows? I think anything's possible.
Well, Lyle Wagner played himself in the original series. He played his son in the original series.
Right.
That's how they explained he was still around. It's
Right.
yeah, you knew my dad in World War II.
Maybe that's how it'll work. Who knows? But that looks good. I think Wonder Woman was probably the best of the DC films, except for that third act. In the third act, I have one problem with the third act is I believe that nothing can replace a real actor, right? If your main villain is a digital effect, like a blue light or a tornado or a thing, it just doesn't work for me. That's why I think Josh Brolin's performance as Thanos. If you've watched the behind the scenes on the DVD that just came out, that's my nerd voice. They put a lot of effort into making sure that Thanos, once they got to this point where they were putting Thanos in a movie where Thanos is the lead character effectively, they wanted him to be photoreal human. Right, so Josh Brolin. When it's Josh Brolin's performance, that's Josh Brolin. Right, that's his face moving. So there has to be some sort of Oscar or award for acting, mocap acting. That and Andy Serkis's portrayal as Snoke, I think, are just standouts that I can't believe that the Academy doesn't acknowledge that type of acting.
Yeah,
but
I think you take the Thanos, photorealistic grape ape thing on one side, and then you have
Grape ape.
stodgy British dude turns out to be a god on the other side. That third act, I think, is the problem that people were seeing in the shared universe, because that third act isn't a Patty Jenkins fight scene. It's a Snyder fight scene.
Right.
It's a 300 resolution scene. It's a reverse telling of an interesting comic with Batman and Superman. It is the thing that a lot of fans saw going wrong in that there's this sort of bright, optimistic movie, but it has to devolve into the, I think Will Smith called it, we're going to go to the swirling tornado of trash in the sky. Right. So that's the problem, is that that has such a stamp on what everybody sees as like the bad thing with the Batman and Superman connection. Right. That once it's inserted as part of the shared universe into that movie, it sort of drags it down.
Well, yeah, I mean, in Batman v Superman, not to bring up, I know it's a sore point with many of us, pain is involved in bringing up that film, but basically at the end of the movie, if you think about it, they fight a baby. Because that kryptonite thing was just born, and 5 minutes later, it's fighting Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. I mean,
I prefer to think of it as a jacked up...
They beat up and murdered a baby at the end.
I prefer to think of him as a jacked up Kryptonian zombie.
Right, but I think of it as a baby.
But your metaphor is correct as well.
It was born of Krypton, whatever was left of Zod, but it was basically they beat up and killed a baby. But moving on, I want to because I
movie worse. Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly.
Man.
Yeah.
Somehow you made Zack Snyder darker, bro.
What's weird when it comes to shared universes, I do like to look at like any movie that Robert Downey Jr. is in where he doesn't play Iron Man as Tony Stark in disguise, right? Like it is the most fun thing to do is to watch another movie that like Robert Downey Jr., The Pickup Artist. Watch that movie, think of it as a young Tony Stark, or watch the Sherlock movies, right? And it's like he's gone back in time and he's pretending to be Sherlock, but it's actually Tony Stark. I love that kind of stuff.
I'm very
so
fond.
you can make any movie a Marvel movie if you just take those actors. It's
I'm very fond of thinking of Back to School as a young college age Tony Stark.
Less Than Zero, right? It's a drugged out Tony Stark, which is kind of his history. His substance abuse is part of that character's history.
We actually accidentally had this conversation on a panel. I had the great joy of doing a panel with Gina Torres yesterday, and there was a discussion that was talking about the Serenity movie, and she said it was weird because Cheadle, what they call him Chewie, who played the operative, and has gone on to have like an amazing career, 12 Years a Slave, Red Belt, but he did a movie called Kinky Boots, which is a musical adaptation. He did that immediately after Serenity. And we then essentially posited a universe where the operative from Serenity goes undercover and becomes the character from Kinky Boots. Which is a heck of a shared universe.
See, this is what when you think about movies too much, this is the nerdy things that bop around in your brain. But I want to ask you guys, since I have you all here, we don't get to talk on a podcast that often. Could you tell the audience a great either indie movie or a movie that they would not know about had they not attended this panel? So I will kick it off because that's one of my favorite things to do is, and this is sort of my mission statement even with doing Film Threat, is to tell you about movies that aren't at the multiplex, that aren't part of the Star Wars, Marvel, Disney, Pixar. I love those movies, but I think my mission is always to tell you about movies you should know about that are just as awesome. They're just different, right? So I'll kick it off with a suggestion. One of my favorites came out a couple years ago. It only recently came out on VOD, but it's a movie called Director's Cut.
Oh God, yes.
Director's Cut. If you've never heard, who's never heard of Director's Cut? Most of you, I assume.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, great. Okay. Yes. Director's Cut is about a movie that gets crowdfunded called Knocked Off, which is a terrible cop thriller that's just, not really distinct in any way. It's a typical movie that you've seen a million of. But it's crowdfunded. One of the crowdfunders is a guy named Herbert Blount, played by Penn Jillette, who also wrote the screenplay, by the way. Penn Jillette.
And this is Penn Jillette, by the way, before he lost like 110 pounds.
Yeah.
This is peak, largest Penn Jillette, full beard, long hair.
Pre-potato.
Yeah, pre-potato,
Right.
pre-potato.
Yeah, so he plays this guy named Herbert Blount, who is a huge movie nerd, who he points out, you start by watching the movie Knocked Off, and he's pointing out, inconsistencies in, little errors in behind the scenes, there's mistakes here, it's very meta, especially if you're a movie nerd, you'll really appreciate it. But what ends up happening is he kidnaps the lead actress, played by Missy Pyle, and then proceeds to make his own version of the movie because he's stolen all the footage. So he basically green screens himself into scenes, and it's hysterical. So it's bizarre. If you're a movie nerd, you would love it. Director's Cut gets a high recommendation. It's directed by a guy named Adam Rifkin, who also did a film called The Last Movie Star with Burt Reynolds, which I would also recommend. So if you want to go down a rabbit hole, check out the films of Adam Rifkin. He did a movie years ago in the early 90s called The Dark Backward, starring Judd Nelson. And it's just... what's that?
And Bill Paxton.
That's right, and Bill Paxton. And it's about this normal dude who grows a third arm out of his back for completely unexplained reasons, and then proceeds to go into stand-up comedy because he has a third arm growing out of his back. And that's it. It's weird. Wayne Newton is in it. It's bizarre. So if you would like to go down a rabbit hole, highly recommend the films of the films of Adam Rifkin. And we'll start with Bobby and we'll work our way down here. What's a movie recommendation you could throw out to the crowd that is not something they would normally know? You can't say Doll Man. You can't say Doll Man. But something that they should know about. And Bobby, you see everything at Filmstrat. This guy reviews 20 movies a month on the site.
I got two, because one of them you guys can go watch here at DragonCon tomorrow on
cool.
the puppetry track, Yamasong March of the Hollows. I got to see it last night. It's amazing. It's a Rod puppet movie about this weird alien world that these robots called Hollows crash land into and try to take over. And it's about the native people fighting back. And I don't want to give anything else away. It was awesome. And then the other movie I reviewed for Film Threat, it's on Amazon Prime streaming if you guys have that. It's called Dinner with the Alchemist, and it's mind-blowing. It cost roughly, I think the director told me $200,000 to make. It's a period piece set in New Orleans in the French Quarter about a string of prostitutes being murdered, and voodoo is real. And just the way it goes about its mystery and who's doing what and why is mind-blowing. But more importantly, remember how much it costs when you're looking at the sets. The special effects they utilized to do that blew my mind.
Wow, that's a great recommendation. Shane, top that one.
It's an animated movie, but it's cheaply animated, but it has a lot of character in the animation, called My Entire High School Sinking into the Sea. And it's literally, that's what happens in the movie. It's a high school that's on a cliffside, and it goes into the ocean, and it's kind of like the Titanic, where they're trying to get up, or with the Poseidon Adventure, where they're trying. The sharks are in the high school, but it's all actual real people.
When was this made?
A year or two ago, maybe. Yeah, and the actors are all well known in the movie, and it's cheaply animated, but it's got. The animation has character to it. and there are shark attacks in the hallways, and you're trying to hide in the janitor's closet and find the stairways to get. And it's really good. It's real. I like that one a lot.
Okay, what's the name of it again? Just
My entire high school sinking into the sea.
cool. All right, Brad, I know you got one.
I got two, actually.
That's cool.
And these are both in a endeavor to shamelessly plug my own reviews that I've
Do it.
reviewed on the site. One,
American circumcision. No,
not that one. Not that one.
I have to brag about Bradley. For once. Okay, Bradley wrote a review of a documentary called American Circumcision, which got the most comments of any review on the site. I think it was like 100 comments from people very angry that he was taking kind of a balanced view, looking at both sides, but it was the anti-circumcision people just came after you. It was very, I mean, they were...
They're called intactivists.
Intactivists, that's right, yes.
Are you serious?
I couldn't make that up.
Are you serious?
Is there a director's cut of this movie?
Very nice. Very nice. I like it. All right.
Well, if you look up American Circumcision on the Film Threat website, you'll see Bradley's review. And then Bradley wrote a feature story about kind of commenting back on the comments just to, clarify some of the things he said in the review. So,
that one didn't get any.
sorry to interrupt you about that, but I did want to throw that out there.
All right. The two I want to mention are one is called Holding On. And it's a local Georgia story from LaGrange, Georgia, from a director named Tamlin Hall, who I'm actually friends with now. He lives here in Atlanta, and we hang out sometimes. And it's about something that happened when he was in high school in LaGrange, Georgia. A person who was a year ahead of him actually committed suicide. And he went to UCLA Film School and promised Holden's parents that he would someday make a movie about the experience that Holden had and about awareness around suicide. And he had schizophrenia and some drug addiction problems, and it's an amazing film. And he's branched it out now into suicide prevention work, and so look that one up. That's well worth looking up. And that was a big Debbie Downer, so sorry. So the next one is a film Chris knows well about called The Theta Girl from Chris Bickle, who is also a local filmmaker from Columbia, South Carolina. The film was made for $14,000, and it looks amazing and tells an amazing story about a fictional drug. And there's crazy, over-the-top violence, and it's horror, and there's a little porn in there. And it's a really fun movie. And it's actually being distributed by Film Threat now.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. I'm the one that works in the plugs. Thank you. Cool. Two great recommendations. Patty, what do you got for us?
I'm gonna go for the whole family with a slight little caveat. 1983, an animated film called Twice Upon a Time. Okay. Oh, we got some fans of it. All right, nice. The animation style was kind of that assembled sort of cardboard style that the South Park started with until they converted it over to computer. And it's a very sly, sort of fairy tale, but it can be enjoyed by everybody. It's got that almost Bullwinkle, Jay Ward-esque humor where, yes, small ones can enjoy it, middle ones can enjoy it, adults can enjoy it. And it was co-produced by some guy named George Lucas. And it never comes up whenever you discuss his career and everything else. And by all means, check out the DVD. There are two versions, a G-rated and a PG-rated version. PG-rated version is a little more funnier because just out of the blue, they'll drop the, I need nightmare scripts, you asshole. They'll just throw out something like that. And it's an absolute treat. It's an absolute delight. It's one of my comfort go-to films. And if you want to check it out, I think it might be yours as well.
Awesome suggestion. Brian, what do you got for us?
I thought I was going to have the oldest poll here, but you beat me by 2 years. A 1985 Japanese movie called Tampopo, which, so there will be some fans. It's not that obscure, but it is one of the few places you will find a young Ken Watanabe, a phrase you haven't been able to say for decades. It has a lot in common, I think, with Pulp Fiction, or Pulp Fiction, I think, has a lot in common with it. It is essentially following the spaghetti western formula, but it's set in Japan and everything revolves around a ramen restaurant. So Ken Watanabe is essentially the stranger, the kind of character who comes into town, has no name, doesn't necessarily stick around, is not necessarily motivated by what everybody thinks he's motivated by, but he helps this widow who's running a ramen shop find like the true spirit of what she wants to do and improve her food and make her restaurant successful. It has several side plots, one including two people who are obsessed with food and sex. This is not a PG-rated movie. And they are at times apparently running from some kind of criminal organization. But they stop to have very sexy food scenes. There is another side plot about a bunch of homeless people who are connoisseurs of food, and they dumpster dive at the finest restaurants in the city. And will occasionally, like, you'll see the 3 or 4 bums sitting on a street corner, and one of them comes up with like a half bottle of wine that somebody tossed out in a dumpster, and they're pouring it into like metal cans, and they're doing the whole wine tasting routine. They have intelligent things to say about the quality of it, what kind of food it would pair with, but it's in a back alley in Tokyo. The entire thing is very well shot, very easy to follow the story even with all the side plots, and it's you can look at it and say, okay, there's a Pulp Fiction element here because of these different stories coming together and intersecting. There's the food culture that ends up going into things like Iron Chef, which get exported to America. And it's just a really neat mashup of a bunch of different cultures into this one weird film.
Wow, that is a great suggestion. Conversely, I want to give you now an opportunity to tell me about the worst film you've ever seen. If you could erase Thanos style with the snap of your fingers this movie from the existence of all humankind, what movie would you say is the worst movie ever made? And I'm saying this because if you ever want to play a joke on someone and recommend a movie that is a terribly shitty movie, it's going to be one of these movies. And I'll kick it off with a movie that I saw this year that on the Film Threat podcast, I went on an angry rant where I just was so upset that I even wasted time seeing this movie. And what's disappointing is this movie came from Blumhouse. Blumhouse, which recently produced the film Get Out, which was nominated for an Oscar as Best Picture. Get Out, which I think is brilliant. Blumhouse also made a movie called Truth or Dare, and it was god-awful. I was so angry that I saw this movie that when I just hulked out on my own podcast and freaked out, and I was upset with that people wasted time, that people were paid money to do this, that it was so god awful. It was disrespectful of the audience. It was dumb. It was
worst use of gaff tape.
Yes, worst use of gaff tape. It was, I don't know, I could go on and on about how much I despised and hated this film, but if you listen to the episode of the Film Threat podcast, which is like 30 minutes of me and everyone who was on that episode just ranting about how much we hated this movie. It's terrible. Do not ever see Truth or Dare unless you hate the person you've recommended it to. So, and now I want to start with Bobby and work our way down. What is a movie that you despise, you wish you could erase from existence? And Bobby, you yourself, you see a lot of movies because with Film Threat, we review anything. And when I say anything, yes, we review the movies in theaters coming out on VOD, but you made a movie right here, sir, sitting in the front row you're in science because you have a blue shirt, I'm assuming. You could submit a movie to Film Threat. We will review that movie. We will review anything. And by the way, Film Threat is accredited by Rotten Tomatoes. So that means that if your movie gets reviewed on Film Threat and you get a 10 out of 10, that means you have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is more than can be said for Zack Snyder movies. So, having said that, what is the worst movie you have seen you wish you could erase from existence, and you wish you could get the time back that you wasted seeing the movie? And it's got to be something that provokes anger, hatred, and suffering. You can't say The Last Jedi. So I'm just saying, if you're one of those people who dislike that movie, which I respect, but as we say, don't be a jerk. But what do you, Bobby, what do you got?
So much like at the Last Jedi debate, I'm about to lose the crowd again. The worst movie I've ever seen is the musical adaptation of Les Miserables, directed by Tom Hooper. It's not a movie. It does nothing cinematically. It does nothing visually. You can get really drunk and take a pair of binoculars to a showing on a theatrical mounting of that play and get a very similar experience. It was miserable. If a movie is meant to be told visually, it's meant to move the story in a visual manner and present itself as something you can't experience on TV, in a theater, reading a book, or whatever else. It fails on every level. Nothing about it is cinematic at all, and I hated it so much.
That's interesting, because I feel like that movie is also one of those films, Les Mis, anyone see, with Hugh Jackman, right? I mean, it's. I know people who hate the film, as you do, and I know other people who like the film. I might be one of those people, but I like the play. I like the play Les Mis. I think it's a beautiful film. I mean, it's beautiful play. It's incredibly moving. The story is, I mean, it's just so heart-wrenching. So, but I'm a guy that I like plays. What can
Chris.
I say? I know you came to see a movie podcast live recorded, but I'm a guy that I go and I see, like I've seen Wicked 3 times. Anyone here see Wicked? But see, I look at it from a nerd's perspective, like, why wasn't the story of like Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader as compelling as this, where we see the Wicked Witch of the West's like point of view and what she experienced, Elphaba. And yes, I'm a nerd, and I like, but that's cool. But I respect your opinion.
I've seen the show, like the theatrical show version of Les Miserables, no less than 4 times, one of them on Broadway. I love that musical. This movie fails.
Okay, all right. Well, I respect your opinion. I have not seen it on Broadway, but I respect your opinion.
Right.
Shane, what is
Half the girls I dated in the 90s had that Les Mis t-shirt. I think just because it looked like a 10,000 Maniacs album cover, but a lot of them had it. So I think of a movie that I would start a support group, just so we could discuss the wounds that left. I would say Batman and Robin. Oh. Because when I walked out of the theater, my first thought was, that made Leprechaun 4 in space look like high art.
So you basically, I got to pull another movie now, thanks. But I agree with you on this one.
So it's on 2 people's lists.
Yeah. I mean, it's they change. Oh, God. Oh.
So
Chris, goddamn you, it's all coming back.
We left the theater
it's all coming
asking,
back now.
Yeah, we left the theater asking, if you swim from your crashed bat plane in a rubber suit to the lair of your villain, are you lifeguard certified? Is that how that works in Gotham?
But also, like, you change Alfred's niece, and then you paid all that money for Vendilla just to be in a snow globe the whole time. That's like your top Victoria's Secret model. You could have paid any girl off the street for that role. And Mr. Freeze just happens to have the strain of the virus that Alfred is just. And she already and she knows how to use the suit when she first puts it on. She knows how to use the Batgirl suit. Everything about it was just horribly, horribly miserable for me.
There's that one shot, which all it is Chris O'Donnell on the ice skates, and he's flying butt backwards into the camera.
Yeah.
And I just picture Joel Schumacher talking to the DP. It's like, all right, they will have Christopher, and it'll come over into the frame there. And I can see it, but Joel, that'll just be a shot of Chris's ass. Yes.
And the nipples, everything.
And the really
I
sad
still enjoyed it more than Batman vs. Superman. Sorry.
The Batman
Yes.
credit card.
And the tragedy was, I thought Clooney could have made a fantastic Batman.
Yeah, he's a good Bruce Wayne. He would make a good Bruce
Yes.
Wayne. He didn't make a good.
And they gave him the Frank Miller stuff to read.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, if it's going to be like this, I'll do it. And then when he got the script, they'd already signed for it, like, I got hosed.
And then everything with Bane, all that was just.
I forgot Bane was in it. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I confused it with a different terrible Batman movie from that era, which was the whole, God, yeah, anyway, there's so many.
Well, Bradley, what's your? I don't think anyone disagrees with that choice. No. But Bradley, what's your worst film ever made? You wish you could erase from existence.
So there's a lot. As you mentioned, we see a lot of films when you're reviewing for Film Threat, and after a while, you don't want to take every film out at the knees that's just bores you or didn't excite you. So, and I have strong opinions about nearly everything. So I'll mention a film that I had high hopes for that didn't do anything. It came out and fell over and died like that weekend. And it was the film version of Philip Pullman's The Golden Compass. And I'm a huge fan of the books. I love the novels. And I like them because they're a contrast with the Harry Potter novels. when Rowling first started writing, she wasn't much of a writer, and he'd been a writer for a very long time when he did The Golden Compass, and the series of books is called His Dark Materials. So I had huge anticipation. I thought it was going to be a great movie, and it came out, and it was just kind of mediocre, and so 2 weeks in, nobody's watching the film, nobody's talking about the film, and I try to talk it up, and it wasn't that bad, and then I had to look in the mirror and say, yeah, okay, it really was that bad. So, The Golden Compass.
I will never see that movie.
I just spent that entire
No one
time
has.
looking at the trailer going, does anybody else want a Coke? I certainly want a Coke. That's what that is.
Bradley,
Lots of polar
I own
bears.
both playing cards and the board game for that movie.
I wanted to love it.
Patty, what do you got?
I had like 3. One was like a classic, which is the Sand Pebbles, which a lot of people rave about, but I think it's 2.5 hours and it goes absolutely nowhere with a brilliant cast. There's also a French film, which I do notoriously despise, but it's so obscure you'll never come across it anyway. It's called The Third Generation. Just don't bother, all right? Unless you're a French erudite, snob of some kind. And I'm not a fan of satire. In the sense of Network is okay, Wag the Dog is okay, but really satire. What the high-end satire is usually, it's always one joke. I get it in the first act. What else you got for me? And then it's nothing. It's just beats hammering that joke. But I think the one movie that needs to be universally burned is the Doom movie, which I vaguely played the game, and it's just it. If we as comics fans, want to slit our throats sometimes, then video game fans, I don't know how you're still walking the earth with your properties. I was burned by the Street Fighter movie in the 90s, but even then, Raul Julia just wearing the hat saved it on a intrinsic level. But yeah, that Doom movie, and that was Dwayne's one of his early first runs too. And the biggest thing was it had the trope of, the hero's trying to save his sister, but he doesn't give a crap about the rest of the families. And they're all dead. It's like, what happened to the rest of them? Oh, I killed them all. I'm like, the hero is supposed to save people he doesn't care about. And that's where I thought the movie failed about it. And yeah, the whole, my family's in that plane, building, dirigible, whatever. Die Hard set that standard, but I would like my cinematic heroes to give a crap about people that they don't.
All right. Brian, I know you have several.
I've got 3. One of them is inspired. It's very similar to your trope about not caring about anybody else but the one object to save. And it's a movie called K2. It came out about 15 years ago. It's one of those great cast dumb movies where they can't use, the big mountain. They got to use the second tallest mountain. Why would that generate any more tension? And they're going in to save the sister of the hero, and they're in a mountain climbing thing, and they climb in bad weather, and they fall in with the guy who survived being trapped, and before it turns out he's a bad guy who'll probably kill them or take their oxygen. It's bad physics, it's bad logic, and it doesn't understand how nitroglycerin works. Like if you put dynamite in the sun too long, it explodes. That's a trope in the movie. It's dumb. And at the end of it, what happens is they save her and nobody else. Like 80% of the people that go to save her die. They would have been better off from a body count standpoint, letting the 2 of them freeze. That would have, and she might still have lived in the scenario they had set up. So, again, like an hour and a half of nothing. Second, if you're a comics fan, the Killing Joke animated movie that came out.
That's bad.
Look, The Killing Joke is problematic. I have a copy because, I'm not a big comics reader, but it was one of those where I'm like, I respect the writers in this and the general story, but the more I went through it, like the whole Barbara Gordon thing really bothered me. And anybody who's more into comics, fridging is a thing and we shouldn't do it. So they decided they were going to bring that movie in. They were going to bring back the voice actors that we all love from the animated series. And then they said, well, we have to do something with Barbara's story. They did something with Barbara's story, but they made it somehow infinitely worse. And now she's a groupie. And the whole motivation goes down to, I'm a fangirl. And that, no, just all of the no. Acres of no. This is the field where my nope grows. It is not barren. It is rich. And the third one, even my phone got bored with my diatribe. The one that I absolutely, and this is what I really hate about it, what you were talking about. I looked forward to the concept. The idea and the cast excited me. It was interesting. And then I saw it, and I want the 2 hours back. I left that movie angry, and it's Repo the Genetic Opera from 2008. Repo the Genetic Opera is a really interesting story about a future where people don't own their organ transplants. They somehow are able to basically monetize medicine, and you can get a loan on your organs so you can survive surgery and live longer. However, if you don't pay the loan, they send a repo guy. And the repo guy is a murderer because you can't live without the organ. That's why you got it. So they kill you to get it. And the repo guy is Anthony Head from Buffy. This movie has Sarah Brightman, Paul Sorvino, Anthony Head, Paris Hilton. I'm not saying that's a bonus. I'm just saying she's in it.
Her face falls off, guys.
Yeah.
Like Paris Hilton's face falls off, just so
it
you're
does.
aware.
So, okay, there's something to watch for. However, as a drummer, musician, someone who likes musicals have an emotional element. You rise and fall through musicals, so there's different tempos, different feels. This has a techno beat that doesn't stop the entire time. This has a techno beat, and everything follows this. And it's like watching a music video for 2.5 hours. It's cut like that. And a music video gets a trick by changing the scene every 2 or 3 seconds. And it goes over to a thing so that you're never looking away from the screen. If you've seen your kids if you saw your kids 20 years ago look at MTV when they played music videos, and they're just transfixed, it's because your brain has this thing called, is that a bear? We are all descended from people who went, is that a bear? And saw the bear and ran. And their friends who were like, what bear? And didn't use their peripheral vision died. And we got together, had fun parties, made more people who were like, look, bears. And so when you go into a sports bar, and you don't want to do sports bar, you want to have dinner with a friend, but there's a big glowing rectangle and it's showing something. You don't care about cricket. You don't understand cricket, but cricket's on the TV, and it keeps drawing your attention away. That is the experience of watching this movie for 2 hours. And it just frustrated me because this is such a great concept, and it's visually an interesting movie, and they did a lot with a little bit of money. But the end of it was just not watchable.
Sitting with the writer-director for an hour.
I was at a con with him when I was a guest, and I was like, I'm going to be wherever you're not because I don't want to have this conversation.
Well, we've talked about the best. We've talked about the worst. I want to thank you guys for showing up today. I want to thank our amazing panel here. Bobby LePire, Shane Mackey, Bradley Gibson, Patty Hawkins, Brian Richardson. I'm Chris Gore. Where can we find you guys on social media?
On Facebook and Twitter, it's Bobby LePire, and then on the Film Threat website.
Yeah. Shane?
Just Facebook and Twitter, the Shane Mackey on Twitter.
Cool.
Pretty much just Film Threat for me.
You can find me on Instagram. It's Patty Hawkins, but no vowels.
I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as Silicon Chef, and also siliconchef.com.
You can find me at that Chris Gore on everything, and visit filmthreat.com, and please listen to the Film Threat podcast. Thank you so much. Let's get out of here. And also, I've got there's a few DVDs in the back for people who who came in late. There's a few DVDs of one of the worst films you will ever see.
Way to sell it, Chris.
But it's a free DVD, and it's, I promise you, it's in a category with all of these bad films, made by a filmmaker named Bill Zabub, who has made films like Dick Shark is one of his movies. And if you come up here also, I've got a few posters for the film, there's a documentary being made about Film Threat called Film Threat Sucks. I've got about 5 posters here if you'd like to grab one of these posters. Thank you so much. I love you, DragonCon. Thank you.
Chris Gore, ladies and gentlemen.
Make sure you rate the panel in the app if you want to see Chris come back next year and every year. So,
Yes, please give me a high rating so they'll bring me back. 5 stars. Thank you.